In the modern data center, most servers don't actually have hard drives anymore. So if we flip this server on and it doesn't have any kind of local hard drive, well, where's the operating system installed? Where's the hypervisor installed? Well, we have a number of options for that, but one of which is booting across the Fibre Channel fabric, targeting a storage array that's out there on the network. In this nugget, we're going to take a look at exactly how we configure UCS for Fibre Channel boot. As with most configurations in UCS, we're going to start off by creating a policy, and that policy is going to get applied to a service profile. So in our case, we need to create a boot policy that will later apply to the service profile. So we want to start out on the Servers tab, and we can come down to Policies, expand that, and Boot Policies. Now there are some default boot policies that come configured, but we're going to right-click on this, say Create a Boot Policy, and we're going to create a policy called FC-boot. Now, most boot policies are going to start off by saying add CD and DVD, because if we do mount an optical image, like an ISO image, then we'd want to boot from that first. But assuming there are no ISOs mounted, then we'd want to move to the Fibre Channel boot portion, which would be adding a SAN boot under VHBAs. VHBAs being, of course, the Fibre Channel, call it a NIC, but a host bus adapter. So we're going to start off by adding the primary boot. We need a primary and a secondary. And the VHBA name is very, very important. So let's keep this in mind. I'm going to call it FC0, which is very simple. If you want to call it something else, that's fine, but you need to document this because when we apply this to a service profile, we have to name the VHBA exactly what's in the boot policy. There is no automatic sensing of what the name is in this case. So we say OK here, and we can see that we've added a primary SAN boot, which is great. All right. We need to add another one, a secondary. So secondary's already been highlighted for us since we already have the primary configured. We'll call this one FC1 and say OK. And so we, in theory, have our SAN boots configured, but we need another step. We need to add what the target is across the network. In other words, the worldwide port name of the storage array itself. Now, before we do the configuration, a picture's worth 1,000 words, so let's draw a picture. So we have a Fibre Channel storage array out on the network connecting through two different SAN fabrics, A and B. And the server that we're configuring here has two HBAs, virtual HBAs. One on the left would be FC0, that's connected up through Fabric A, and the one on the right would be configured as FC1 in our case, and that would be configured through Fibre Channel SAN Fabric B. Now, the Fibre Channel storage array, in theory, should have redundant connections to each fabric, or at least that's what UCS assumes is happening here. So what we have is we have the primary connection for the storage array through A, and then the secondary connection. Then we have another primary connection through B and a secondary connection through B. Now, meanwhile, as far as our SAN primary and SAN secondary boot options are concerned, those are directly tied to the FC0 and FC1 interfaces. So our primary is just one primary over on the left in this case, so again through Fabric A or FC0, and then the secondary boot is through B. Why do I say all of this? Well, UCS is going to assume that FC0 has a primary target and a secondary target through SAN Fabric A. Same thing on the right. FC1 has a primary target through Fabric B and a secondary target also through Fabric B. And so we're going to want to configure all four of these connections as part of this boot policy. So we're going to come down and add a SAN boot target. And again, we see here is we can add a target to the primary or the secondary. So let's add to the primary, which is FC0. And real quick note on this boot target LUN ID. So this LUN ID is defined by the storage array itself. So when you're configuring the boot LUN on the storage array, you need to make sure that we document what the boot LUN ID is. It's different on each storage array. A lot of times it's 0, but not always. So pay attention to what the LUN ID is. If we don't have the right LUN ID configured here, then it will fail to boot. So the boot target, again, would be the worldwide port name of that primary Fabric A interface for the storage array. So we're going to call this, let's say 50, and then at the end we'll mark this as saying, well, we'll call it Fabric A and 11. Again, I'm making this up because it's an example, but in real life, the worldwide port name is burned into the storage array's VHBA, or well, I guess physical HBAs on the storage array. So we need to actually document what those worldwide port names are when we're configuring the SAN. And again, is this the primary for A or the secondary for A? So we're going to configure the primary first, and then we can add another SAN boot target to the primary, and we'll call this one, again, just making up numbers here, AA at the end for fabric A, 22 for the secondary. Secondary is already picked. I can't even pick primary, secondary, because I've already added a primary for this fabric, and say OK. Now we're going to add those SAN boot targets to our B fabric, our secondary fabric. So 50, we'll call this BB11 for primary, hit OK, and add another one, and 50. This feels a little monotonous by the time we get to the fourth one, doesn't it? But hey, we're almost done. Secondary, hit OK. And all right, now we can expand these and see that yes, indeed, I have configured all 4 of these SAN targets, the primary and secondary for fabric A, the primary and secondary for fabric B. A robust fiber channel storage area network does consist of these 4 connections. So try to make sure that in a production environment we have all 4 of these connections. And with that, we can say, OK, we have configured our fiber channel boot policy. A proper fiber channel boot policy consists of, first of all, that CD/DVD, that optical option at the start, followed by the primary SAN boot and the secondary SAN boot, both of which have 2 individual targets, so 4 total connections. Having configured the fiber channel boot policy, we can then apply it to the service profile. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.